People that teach improvisation make more money. That was fascinating. That people that teach you to be creative in making your music are more creative with the business models.
Hi everyone, you're watching the Piano Teaching Podcast, Tim Topham TV, and this is episode number 43. Hi everyone, and thanks so much for watching and listening to this episode of Tim Topham TV. We've got a great show coming up for you today with a very special guest called David Cutler. And this is continuing our Business Month theme, where we're going to be talking about building income and impact and all the ways that you can go about making sure that you're doing everything you can to be using your time most effectively and creating the best studio, the best outcomes for your students, and also the best and most sustainable income for you and your family. Now, before we dive too far into today's podcast, I did want to thank my sponsors today. Firstly, my Inner Circle, which is my private community. Yes, I am sponsoring my own podcast, but I thought this was a great opportunity to get word out to you guys about the Inner Circle, because it's people like you who are listening to podcasts like this and they're therefore keen to explore new ideas, share resources, meet with kind of the top thinkers in the world, and just really learn how to engage and inspire your students in the best way possible. You are the kind of people who I want to see inside my Inner Circle. So in there are all my resources, training videos. We have monthly online meetups called masterminds, webinars, downloads, lesson plans, all that kind of stuff. That's all the good stuff, right? We've also got an online forum where you can ask any questions you want and you can get support from the whole community to help you with your teaching. And this is where everyone is hanging out at the moment. It's a very, very cool space, and I really look forward to welcoming you. So if you're interested to check it out, find out a little bit more, have a listen to what I say about it, what you get for it, then head to timtopham.com/community. My second sponsor today is Forte School of Music. Now, you may well remember Paul Myatt, one of my guest authors on the blog, runs Forte School of Music. It's been a huge success story in Australia with around 4,000 students and schools in all major capital cities. And they are currently looking for entrepreneurial music teachers who are interested in building a successful business in Australia and other countries with the opportunity to be the master franchisor in their territory. Forte schools can build to the size you're able to manage. Some schools are small with just a couple of hundred students, while others have nearly 1,000 students and $1 million turnover. The key to success after being in business for 22 years is quality, the courses, the systems, but most importantly, the teachers who offer the pedagogically sound curriculum. So you can find out more about Forte School of Music and franchising and all their resources, all that kind of great stuff at fortemusic.com.au/business. So my guest today is David Cutler. He's Associate Professor of Music Entrepreneurship at the School of Music at the University of Southern Carolina, and he is probably best known for his fantastic books, the two of them, the most popular ones, The Savvy Musician and The Savvy Music Teacher. And The Savvy Music Teacher is basically the one I'm telling everyone about this year. I read it last year. In fact, it's right next to me here on the table. I keep it almost as a quick reference, and you can see the notes I've got in there and stuff. This book is just brilliant. If you're looking for learning about how to make the biggest impact and to create the biggest income and the most sustainable kind of living as a music teacher, then you need to get that book, The Savvy Music Teacher. It's on my resources page. You can just head to timtopham.com/resources to find out all the top selling books for my audience. So David balances a varied profile as a jazz and classical composer, a pianist, an educator, an arranger, author, speaker, and director of the world's premier arts entrepreneurship workshop called The Savvy Musician in Action. His books on career, income, and impact models, the two that I just talked about today, have influenced a generation of musicians from across the globe. I'm not going to tell you too much more about David because you just have to meet the guy. He's inspiring, he has great ideas, and he's going to make you really, really think hard about all the different ways that you can create impact, and increase your income. Here's David Cutler. So, David Cutler, an honour to have you on my show. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to meet you.
It's so good to connect with you because your book, The Savvy Music Teacher, which we're going to talk about today, seriously is my top. I'm telling everyone about this book. I think it is really the most important book any music teacher should read at the moment. So we're going to talk about that in a second. Before we get to it, can you tell us a little bit about what you do day to day at the moment? Because you've got a huge career portfolio of things that you do.
Sure. Well, like many musicians, I do lots of things. So I'm a pianist, a composer, a public speaker, an educator, a consultant, do many, many things. I work at the University of South Carolina, where I'm the director of music entrepreneurship. So that's kind of my one big job that I do. Run a bunch of programs. I have a couple of huge ones coming up this summer. One is a summit focused on the future of music in higher education. And then right after that, I run something called Savvy Musician in Action, which is an experiential arts entrepreneurship workshop that's really cool. And we have people coming from all over the world, including someone from Australia.
Really?
So there you go.
Oh, there you go. Do you know what that person teaches or does, or their instrument or anything, or which city?
Kind of entrepreneurship is her area is in entrepreneurship.
Fantastic.
I think you call it something different.
Yeah, no, we do. And I'm fascinated by the entrepreneurship part of your role. And you're an associate professor at the University of South Carolina, and your job is to look after this entrepreneurial course, which I think is so good. And it interests me particularly because I'm preparing to talk to a music tech in education conference next Friday about careers and technology. And in my research, I found out that it's actually quite rare for universities to be offering entrepreneurship, although I think it's starting. There's a movement that's beginning. So why has the topic of business for music majors been neglected for so long, do you think?
Well, for a long time, I mean, this is just kind of how our institution was structured. When music schools were built, our goal was to architect really great musicians, and we have done an exceptional job with that. But then the question is, what are they going to do with that, and how will they find their way in society? So I think there has been an increasing awareness that the world is changing, and we need to prepare people for their future, not just our past, but their future. And of course, career options are changing drastically, so it's important to address these kinds of things too. So for me, entrepreneurship is not just about careers. It's about a way of being in the world. It's about a way of problem solving. It's about a way of impacting communities. But certainly career development is part of that. And it has been really exciting to see programs pay more attention not only to the artistic success of their students, but also the professional success.
A lot of the discussion around music careers these days is talking about this portfolio career, and you are a great case in point. I am too, to a large extent. But a lot of the talk about portfolio careers still seem to think about kind of, in my opinion, old school ideas of sort of arts management, retail, teaching, recording. But one big aspect seems to be technology that seems to have been forgotten. So the whole wealth of sort of people that could become software developers and app people and all these kind of things. So how do you think online technology could impact the ways musicians can earn a living in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, it already has transformed the way that we operate as musicians, and I personally am very optimistic. I think this is a great time to be alive, a great time to be a musician. And I think music, just about anyone, just about anywhere can access just about any music, just about any time of day, which is incredible. And so I think this is in many ways kind of a heyday for music. We talk about the death of the music industry. Music has never been in a better place. But there is a question, we can talk about the death of the recording industry, that's something different. But there is a question at this moment where music is doing so well about what does it mean for musicians? And what does it mean for professional musicians, as the line between amateur and professional gets blurred, for example. So the exciting thing about today is that you or anyone, or me, or anyone else who's listening to this can compete on completely equal footing with Sony, right? It's no more expensive to visit your website or your video than something they do. On the other hand, someone who's never taken a lesson in their life also competes at that same level. So it's a game changer, and there will be new winners and new losers, and already have been. And so the question is, how can you be in the right side of that equation? But it's exciting that the new technological innovations, I know we're going to be talking about music teaching, and this is just one of the issues where it used to be, you would want to find a good teacher who you could access, who is local. But we're now moving into this flat world where literally anybody can study with anyone else if they have the time and the interest to meet with you. And so the economy is different. And why would sometimes we might even pay more, for example, to study with someone who's not biased than a local person. And of course, there are certain things that online lessons can do that in-person lessons don't do as well, and vice versa. So it's interesting in this flat world to figure out, well, how do you make a mark where everyone starts on equal footing?
Sorry, are you saying flat world? What was that word you used?
Flat world, yeah. In other words, you used to be really far away from us. And in fact, I think we're at the same time now, but 12 hours separated, right?
Yeah.
There would be but it's okay. So it's a little bit later. You had to wait for my dinner. I had to wait for your breakfast or whatever. And we're just chatting. It's a flat world. Anyone can access anything.
So you're sort of saying flat in that where there used to be hierarchy. Just take the recording industry for example. There was a hierarchy of record labels and people in them. Now technology has created a flat playing field.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anybody can get on it. It's not. You don't even have to hike to get up it. You can just enter that playing field.
Fantastic.
Which is good and bad.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Depending on how you approach it. And so, for example, as performers, for a long time, playing well was the sole goal. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but we can all hear incredible music played at incredible. In the 1870s, if you wanted to hear, or not early 1900s, if you wanted to experience music, you had a couple options. You could make it yourself or go to a show and hear someone perform it. And then throughout the 20th century, there were more mechanisms to be able to access this art. But now literally everyone has access to everything and has the potential to reach everyone. So the question now is, how do you find a mark? It's no longer being able to reach your audience, it's getting them to care. And the equation has changed. And one of the remarkable things, for example, talking about winners and losers, in the 20th century, being extraordinary at something was noteworthy. But in the 21st century, it's oddly unremarkable to do one thing really, really well. Lots of people do one thing really well. So I'm not saying this is right or wrong, or I endorse this or don't, but it's interesting. We live in a world where, for example, a video is much more likely to go viral if you have one person playing 4 instruments than 4 people playing 1 instrument, right? Now, the way most of us learned was you learn one thing and you get really, really good at that. But for whatever reason, in the 21st century, economy and world of attention, there are many economies, and attention is one of them. That's less interesting to many people, which there's a place for it. There are places where it is valued, but people have seen really high performance, but we're still enthralled by that multiple talents. So what does that mean for your audience? What does that mean for music teachers? What does that mean for independent musicians? What does that mean for the academy, which has been built around teaching people to do this one single thing?
I heard a great snippet of a conversation or a talk that Seth Godin, the great marketing sort of whiz, gave to the Carnegie performance students, about the fact that, the best recordings are all out there. Most of them are accessible for free. And he was kind of saying, we don't need any more recordings of the Beethoven sonatas. They're out there. They've been done. we don't need more recordings of what's written on the page. What we need is something different, and that's kind of become what the future is going to be potentially. I like that, and I also, in regard to that, great performances are fantastic things, and there will always be a place for them. But I love my whole concept is teaching differently. It's about thinking outside the box and wondering what else can we be doing.
One of the things I love to do, which is always marrying tradition and innovation. I don't know if this is about your question or not, but along those lines is so much a part of the way we learn as classical musicians. One thing that's really important is this idea of authentic performance practice. And I love that. I've done that a lot. I think there's great value for it. Some of the most meaningful musical moments I've ever experienced have been by having someone capture the intentions of a composer. And as a composer myself, I love the idea that we are considered omnipotent beings and that our decisions stand for everything. But as a performer, I kind of resent that, the idea that the composers were the great ones and we just had to be photocopy machines or whatever it is. So sometimes I like to do that, but I've also become really excited about this idea in my own work and for anyone else who's interested of innovative performance practice. And how can you take a piece like you're talking about Beethoven's sonatas that has been performed and recorded thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of times before and perform it in a way that is instantly totally different than anyone else has played it? And that probably requires something more than a crescendo in bar 4 instead of bar 5, something like that. How do you take a piece and make it your own? Is it by putting it in a new context where you're working interdisciplinarily with a dancer? Is it by improvising on top of it? Is it by transposing it or orchestrating it for another ensemble? Is it by putting some other material on top of it? And I know that's sacrilege in a lot of places. That's okay. You can do things like that because in other places it becomes really, really exciting. And actually, I have a story about that. If I'm already not totally off track, but
go for it.
Here's an example of that and making a mark in the 21st century. So, a group contacted me. They wanted to play a piece. It's a brass quintet. They were coming to town, and they asked me if I wanted to play a piece with them. Probably heard of it, Rhapsody in Blue, George Gershwin. A very, very famous piece of music. And I'm guessing they asked me because they knew me, they liked me, they thought I'd do a good job, and because I was local. And actually, they played it with other pianists before, but they didn't want to fly someone in, so they asked me. And so, of course, I was flattered, but I thought about it. I started to think, what could I do with this music so that they would never consider performing with any pianist ever again, at least for this piece. And then I started to think, what could I do with the band part so that a presenter would never consider hiring any other group to perform this piece again? And it grew and grew and grew. I started by recomposing the piano part. So you'd still recognize it. It has some of the same things, but it's more virtuosic than the original. It has more styles and more character and things like that. And then I rewrote the ensemble part, and this group plays everything from memory, so we kind of choreographed it. And anyway, now it's called Rhapsody in Purple. And it's a different thing, and it's taken on a new meaning. And after we in a world where so many people have heard this piece, and it's very hard to get any traction with this, suddenly people have been caring about this piece in a different way. And I don't know if I'm the best player who's ever played it, because a lot of people have, but this is one that you will remember. And I think that's a great opportunity in the 21st century. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't think we should be afraid of doing exactly what you've done. I cannot imagine Gershwin, Beethoven, Liszt, Bach, any of these guys getting upset with people improvising and mucking around with their music, because that's exactly what they did.
That's right. I don't know if you know a jazz pianist named Kenny Werner, but he said, would Thelonious Monk have won the Thelonious Monk competition? Not a chance.
That's it.
Doesn't enough like Monk.
Yeah. No, it's so important to keep in mind. Well, look, let's talk about your book and some of the concepts in it, because I think it is so relevant for all teachers out there today. And I love one of your quotes at the beginning. I'm going to read because I reckon it just highlights the tack or the approach that you've taken with the book. It says this book provides no diagrams of hand positions, explanations of breathing techniques, or strategies for helping students memorize quickly, nor does it endorse a singular correct model of education to which all savvy music teachers should and must aspire. So can you tell us, what does your book do?
Well, at the core of the book is kind of a philosophy that one thing that's really important, money is not everything, but money is important. There is no, most of us who go into music, we don't aspire to be, to get rich quick, but most of us don't aspire to be living out of a dumpster and on food stamps either. Money is not everything, but it's important. It's important if you want to do meaningful artistic projects, or to have a family, or to do any of these other things. So one of the issues it looks at is income models, and actually whole financial models, but particularly income models. One of the main reasons people go into music is to make an impact on this world. So in the beginning, I outlined this concept and this philosophy that I try and use in my life, that if you do it right, income and impact should be inextricably linked. And if you do it right, they both go up together. So if you have a desire to make more income, here's a strategy. Figure out how to make more impact. So that could mean impacting more people, or impacting the same amount of people on a deeper level. If, on the other hand, you already have a higher level of impact, make sure it's backed by a sound financial model. And clearly there is no direct correlation between the amount of money people make and how good of a teacher they are, or how great of art there is. Yet I did find, in fact, that there seems to be a correlation on a number of levels. So, for example, here, this was really interesting. So, and this I did not expect, one of the trends that I found throughout the book, because I interviewed a whole bunch of people, that people that teach improvisation make more money. That was fascinating. That people that teach you to be creative in making your music are more creative with the business models. Except that was my first interpretation of it. And then I went back and I realized something different. That not all teachers who teach improvisation make more money. Jazz teachers who teach improvisation make the same amount of money as classical teachers who don't teach improvisation. Classical teachers who teach improvisation make more, because what they're doing is they're taking a status quo and they're challenging that and finding their own way. And that was amazing.
Absolutely.
Finding that, and not something that and it took several steps to be able to figure that out. And then I kept seeing these trends over and over again.
It doesn't surprise me in many ways, because I think that breaking down that tradition of the classical, let's talk pianist because of my audience, the classical piano teacher, breaking down that and offering more variety in lessons is what I'm all about. It's what I'm trying to promote. So it doesn't actually surprise me, because I think many parents can see the value in a child knowing about being creative and learning about it for their future interest in music continuing on for life. That's kind of, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Without a doubt. I mean, the question about creative, and, one of the ways that and by the way, I think it's a big planet. It may be a flat planet, but it's a big one. Mm. And there's rooms for all kinds of music and all kinds of music instruction. So I would never want to be prescriptive. I think there are many ways to live your life. But in terms of creativity, one of the ways that we often justify music study is it builds creativity. I'm sure you've heard that a lot. And I see it all the time on websites. Why study music? because it makes people creative or something like that. And when I found that when you hold that up, it doesn't really hold up to scrutiny in a lot of cases. So I asked teachers, well, what is it that you do that's creative? I mean, certainly music can teach creativity, but so can math or so can English. It's just that it often doesn't. So what is it that's creative? Well, music is creative inherently. Well, how do you justify that? And so one of the things that I've heard a lot is, well, every time you play a piece of music, it's different. Therefore, music is creative. So it seems to me that, every time I walk from this chair where I am now to the door is a little different, because sometimes I go a little faster, or I go a little slower, or I go around, or there's shoes on the floor or whatever. So in fact, there's probably more variety in the way I walk to the door than the way that I play a Beethoven sonata,
yeah,
right?
100%.
So maybe if we want a more creative society, we just need to walk more. But accidental variance is not the same thing as asking, will our students be more likely to make creative problem-solving decisions throughout their life as a result of their music training? And of course, improvisation is only one way to engage in a creative process through music training. But I think a lot of teachers think, there's this assumption, certainly from outside the music community, but even a lot of music teachers, that it's just creative because it just is, because we say that it is. But if that is something that you value, and I think there is absolutely a place for people that teach non-creative music making where the goal is to play the notes in the right way with the right rhythms as dictated by the intents of the teacher and the composer and things like that. There's absolutely a place for that in the world. And there are students that want to study that, but there's a place for a lot of other things. And because that first description that I had is where most music teachers are, I think there's a great opportunity to take another path.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you think the other path has more appeal as we move further into the 21st century?
Well, I think it could, and I think there are a lot of case studies, the rare examples where it really happens. I think the results are just, the people that are doing one of the common. I interviewed lots of people for this book, and one of the common concerns that I hear is, for example, about retention. People take music and then they get into middle school and they have other things competing for their time and they don't stay. And I heard lots of teachers that teach in a certain way say that. And then I had other teachers that are doing these crazy, amazing, interactive events and things like that. One teacher saying, yeah, my students in middle school and in high school and elementary school, they're telling their family they don't want to go to Disney World just so they can stay and take music during the summer.
How cool is that?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I taught a class focused on the business of music teaching, and in the class I had people of all different instruments, so much broader than your audience, which is primarily pianists and piano teachers, right?
Yeah.
So it could be pianists, it was vocalists, it was string players, guitarists, wind players, percussionists, different genres of music. And, seemingly they came from very different worlds. And we went through and talked about their lesson experience growing up, and it was incredible. They all had essentially exactly the same lesson experience. Different regions of the country, they played different things. Some of it was better. Some of them had a better experience. Some of them had a worse experience. But it's interesting how in our culture, in this particular culture of independent music teaching, it seems like most people have all arrived at the same conclusions. Mm-hmm. So, for example, and at first they said, no, that's impossible. It was so varied, there's no way you could compare what I learned as a trombonist to what you did as a classical pianist. So we went through, I made 20 categories, and I went through, and so what's the range? What was the mechanism so how often did you take lessons, and what was that? Once a week, one-on-one lesson with someone who plays the same exact instrument as me. They all did that, right?
Yeah.
And what was the role of recitals? And some of their teachers had 1 or 2 recitals per year. There was some difference because some teachers had 0 recitals and some had 1 or 2 recitals per year. The ones that had recitals, well, what was that like? It was a serious event. One person went, they clapped, and the next person went, they clapped, which is great. That's one vehicle. But there are 100,000 ways to approach doing a recital. We talked about technology. Now, in all fairness, it was a different era. So what was the use of technology? A metronome, right?
Yep.
And now we have a lot more tools. But we went by, one style, one way. Most of them, they all learned to approach music in one single way. Like, we would always start with the music. I didn't have a single student who had a teacher that taught them sometimes to start with the music and sometimes to start with their ear and sometimes to, there are so many ways to approach music, but it seems like they all study one genre. The jazz people would study multiple genres, but it was like jazz and kind of jazz-esque, like, bossa nova and those other things.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
There's so much potential out there, yet we all solve the problem the same exact way.
And so the conclusion from that was, were you surprised that everyone was taught in the same way, even though there were different instruments, or was that exactly what you were predicting would happen? Yeah,
it's pretty much what I that wasn't a surprise to me as much, because that's we live in this world where in so many societies or communities, like we tend to all think the same way in a very narrow thing. And for me personally, and some other really savvy teachers that are certainly out there that are doing just things that are very different than that. My personal approach to life is that if 1,000 people view a particular problem or circumstance and 999 of them arrive at a similar conclusion, I aspire to be the one who sees things differently. So it's almost, it kind of started out just that was my personality, but it's now become a personal philosophy. And I found that while you can get in trouble doing that has been a very effective path to success. When everyone's doing the same thing, which is what happens in most communities, just like everyone does the same thing, do something else, right? When it's your birthday, what does everyone do? They all send a message on Facebook. So, no, you're not going to be memorable if you send a message on Facebook, so do it not on Facebook, anywhere else.
Considering that Facebook reminds you of it anyway, it's not very meaningful.
Whatever it is. And it can be for teaching or for playing or for the integration of technology or whatever it is. I mean, this is a basic business and life concept. If everyone's solving a problem one way, do something different. Yeah. Doesn't mean that there's something wrong with that one way, but everyone's already doing it. It's already congested there. And if you can do something in a different way that is relevant, that's the jackpot. So your question about does it make a difference? We live in a world where, getting right, wrong answers is increasingly outsourced somewhere else or done by a computer. And so we have leaders of all political persuasions saying one of the most important skills in the 21st century is creativity, for example. And there are other ones. Well, creativity is something that's very valued. Music is really cool. Most music doesn't teach creativity. Hey, or not on a very deep level. I know I'll probably get into a little trouble with that. I'm happy to go back and forth with anyone on that. But maybe we touch it this much. But if you become a teacher we teach music and creativity, then that would be very desirable for people, and I imagine that they would do quite well. And there are many case studies of that.
So we've kind of touched on some mindset concepts here. I wonder if you could narrow it down in a business sense, what do you think is the most important mindset that music teachers need to have to be successful?
You're talking about in terms of so again, I look at
in terms of success. I guess successful business kind of approach.
They're not just asking about the impact model and what they do for students, but how do you build a successful business?
Yeah.
And before I answer, because of course all these words are really weighted. What does a success? So my first question would be, what do you mean by a successful business? Are you talking about that earns a lot of money, that reaches a lot of people, that transforms the life of your students into, I mean, what, so give me a definition and maybe I'll have an idea.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that I hear a lot of teachers get stuck in is working too much and being worn out a lot. So I think the idea of a successful one would be one where you can balance your social and your personal life with your business, and you're not teaching, 100 hours a week and 100 students, and also one that has an impact on the students. So you're not just repeating the same old, but you have some sense of creativity. You're having an impact on students. So I guess it's a bit of both, David, if that makes sense. That's my opinion of what's successful. Something that's sustainable and something that's having an impact.
Right, absolutely. Well, this is actually one way in which income and impact are directly related, because you have to make enough income to get by. And so music teachers that don't have a strong business sense, often what they think is the solution to the problem is I've just got to teach 40 hours a week.
Teach
right?
more.
That's a normal job, right? 40 hours a week. Yes and no. I mean, that's like a normal job might be 40 hours a week, but that also includes, you don't have to be on the way you do when you're teaching lessons all the time. So, that might even include a bathroom break every once in a while or whatever it is. That's different than teaching. I mean, that is not sustainable. And in the book, I use a model of 20 hours per week as that's about a full-time job in teaching. Of course, there are all kinds of different models. But everyone I know, you're going 30 hours. People have different tolerance, but you can really burn out from that. And if you have to teach that many hours to just get by and you're getting burnt out, you're not going to be as good of a teacher.
Exactly.
And therefore, your students aren't going to get as much out of it. So that's one way in which income and impact are directly related. On the other hand, if you're doing okay and you're not constantly stressed about, the collection agency knocking on your door and all those things, then you might be more focused on your students and offer a better service. So there are many ways to solve this problem. So the question is, one of the questions is, how can I work a reasonable amount of hours a week and reach my desired income? Which It would be helpful to know what that is. One of the ways that you can do that, so one thing is, pricing is something that you can look at. One way you could do it, if you need to make more money, is you could raise your rate. Now, a lot of times people say, oh, well, this is the going rate. People would never pay more than that. Well, it might be in your community. Some communities have a large variance. Some communities have, pretty much a standard rate or whatever it is. But that's particularly true, in almost every industry. There are many, many price points. And so in a world where everyone offers essentially the same service, I offer weekly lessons for a half an hour. I teach all kinds of students, whatever you say, but, with this pedagogy, well, they might like you better, and they might be a little better teacher or whatever, but essentially it feels like the same service, just like most rhapsodies and blues seem like the same piece, right? But when you offer something that's clearly differentiated, that's valuable, a lot of times, depending on who your market is, they might be excited to pay more per service because what they're getting is simply different.
Yeah.
So
it comes right back to what you were saying before about if 99 people are doing the same thing, let's be the one person that isn't, and maybe you can charge a greater rate for that.
So, for example, I interviewed one piano teacher who does many, many creative things. But one of the things that he does with his students, and interestingly, I usually start for the book. So I have all these case studies. I usually start with an idea, and I'm like kind of a general idea, and then who does this? And someone should do this. So to me, this seems like a very obvious idea, but very, very few people are doing it. So this guy, he teaches kids, primarily young kids. But one of the projects he does each year is he has his kids and he works with them on it, make music videos. So they record the piece in a studio and then they make videos. And they'll make them with like Legomation, or there's one guy who was playing like the creepy crawly spider or whatever. And they did something with this spider thing and wow. Yeah. And people say, well, I can study anywhere, or my kid can study music. He's more engaged. He actually practices harder because instead of just playing for the teacher, is going to be on YouTube for everyone to hear. And he gets so inside the music because they can talk about, well, what is the character? What's it trying to suggest? And what does it mean here, right? So the kids get deeper into the music. And it's like, I can go anywhere. Now, I don't actually know in this particular example if he charges more than a competition or not. But for someone who does that, I can go to the competition, I can learn classical piano music. Or I can go to this person, I can learn classical piano music, but I'm also going to be making videos. Wow, that's really engaging. Maybe I'm willing to pay $10 more an hour, as a parent, because the education is more. Now, from the teacher point of view, it's still an hour or a half hour, for kids is a half hour lesson or whatever it is. So one way is by offering something different at a higher price point, and some people will want to pay that.
Yep.
Another possibility is by being more efficient, right? So one of the problems in the life of an independent teacher is that it's primarily private lessons. Now, it's interesting, when we talk about how to teach music, and I don't know if I think it's the same way in Australia, but there's kind of this assumption that in a lot of first world countries, that the best way to learn music is through a one-on-one private lesson with someone who does this. Now, this is not universal. There are many, like the El Sistema model, the private lesson is the last thing that comes, right? Mm-hmm. So this is not a universal law of nature, but this is just an assumption that is so ingrained in us that that's the way things are done. We don't even question that premise. And I'm not saying that it's not that's how I learned, and I feel like I learned a lot from it, and I'm sure you did too, and there are lots of benefits. But there are many ways to solve this problem. So, for example, here's a way to save some time and make this. So one of the things I talk about in the book that I think is really helpful, just in terms of charging model, is if anyone charges by the hour, please get rid of it as soon as you possibly can. That is a terrible way to run a business, right? Music teaching business. To charge, and I really advocate for a tuition system, which could be semester, annual tuition, or whatever it is. But one of the great things so even if you charge X amount of dollars per hour and there are 16 weeks in a semester, just multiply it and then charge that amount. You can divide it up in different ways. Anyway, we can talk about the logistics of collecting the payment. But one of the great things about charging tuition is it can be liberating to you as a teacher and to your students, because you're not charging by the hour of the lesson. You're charging for this experience over a semester.
The outcome.
So all of a sudden, instead of maybe your semester is 15 weeks, let's say, instead of 15 one-hour lessons, maybe you have 13 one-hour lessons. And for 2 of the weeks, you don't have any lessons, but you do something else that mixes it up. That's maybe you have a bunch of group classes. So for that week, let's say you have 20 hours worth of students, which I use as the full-time model. So you usually teach 20 hours per week. But on the week where you're doing group lessons, maybe you even do 90-minute lessons. So it's more time for the student, but you wind up scheduling 5 different hours of it. So you save 15 hours or 10 hours of it, so you save 10 hours, right? So it's a varied experience for your students. You've saved 10 hours, and you've charged the same amount as your hourly rate in this model or whatever. So it's being more efficient. Now, you could go further, and I know I talked to some teachers that taught private lessons, and then they moved to more of a group lesson model. But the main reason that they started out to do it was just because they were trying to be more efficient, and they wanted to reach they needed to work less hours and make more money. So, just very simple math. Mm-hmm. Let's say your private lesson, to make it very simple, private lesson, you charge $50 for an hour in this particular model, but you do a group lesson and you charge $20 to be involved with it, and you get 4 kids. So you're making $80 an hour for 4 kids. And the truth of the matter is that group lessons are much worse than private lessons at achieving certain things. And they're way better at achieving other things. It depends on what you care about, right? So if you care about, for example, facilitating community, which is another rationale we give for music lessons. I mean, being a piano student is a lonely thing.
It's about the most isolated, isn't it?
Right. It's very But then you build community, and you can teach people not only about themselves, they can learn from one another, they can critique each other, they can play collaboratively, they can get competitive with one another, and so you can learn the piece first, right? So there's the peer pressure, which may work in certain cases. So I know some teachers, they started out, maybe it was a financial concern, and they realized my students, for them, my students are learning more. So they wind up teaching for fewer hours, making way more money, impacting more students, and impacting each individual student, and their students are advancing more quickly for that particular person.
Yep.
And you could go further and further with that in terms of the time thing. I mean, maybe part of your model is reaching more people. So you have to, maybe you build into your business model a place where once a month you do a workshop where people pay $20 to come to your workshop, and you bring 200 people there. Right? What did I say? $20? 200 people. Right? So you focus on the marketing. It's one, you get a devoted audience. It's not that much money. Or $10 a piece, right? So you make $2,000 for that hour, but you pay rent for it. You pay $50 rent. So you made $1,950 for that hour. Now you have to market it and whatever it is. But that could be part of your business model. Or maybe once a month, you do something online that's a masterclass that reaches 2,000 people.
Yeah.
Because nobody else is talking about it like you, they want to, and they'll pay their $10. 2,000 people times $10. Now you got $20,000, right? And then maybe afterwards you make it available for an even higher price or a lower price or something like that, so that it pays dividends and it actually produces passive income.
Yep.
Much is not everything, but it's important, and you've got to figure out a model that works.
I love having this kind of discussion. I knew this would happen, David. Like the inspirational ideas are just fantastic. It's what we need, because it's so easy, as you say, to just get stuck in that routine and stay in the box. It was interesting. In March, I had a group teaching month, and in fact, a lot of the kind of themes that I chose this year happened to be completely correlated between the results of the survey of my readership at the start of the year and the problems they were having, and the segments in your book, which was really, really interesting. So in March, episodes on the podcast 33, 34, and 35 were all about group teaching. I interviewed people who are changing to group teaching or whatever. And one of them, the title of the podcast was Building a Piano Community, with Laura Kahar. It was a teacher in Sydney who's doing exactly what you've said, and just changing the model to do 2 group classes every, what we have terms over here. And just building this amazing sense of community, and she is able to reach more people. She's also able to charge more because she's doing something that no one else is doing, even in a highly competitive marketplace there in Sydney. So we know it works, and it's very exciting.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. Out of interest, how did you find the people who you used as case studies in your book? Because there's a great wealth of different people there.
About 150, and I can say it was hard. It was somewhere harder than others. So one way that I did it was I looked at literally thousands of websites, and it was very important to me in doing this to also balance different geographical regions, different instruments. And things like that. So one thing that I did is I looked at just a lot of websites. I just did a lot of Google searches in different ways. And I'm sure there are a lot of good teachers, but when I looked at a website, this was at the beginning stage when I had lots of stories to figure out. And I looked, I'm sure there's a good teacher. Is there anything interesting as represented to them? Or are they just totally generic and they're just like every teacher? And a lot of sites were like that. But sometimes I would go and I would find one thing that was just interesting. So at the beginning, when I had lots of stories, oh, that's cool, I should tap into that. It got harder as I went along. So I also asked lots of people for references in a lot of different ways. Sometimes I'd have a very specific story in mind. One of the things that was interesting, my first book is called The Savvy Musician, and it's for all musicians. And what I found in that particular book was that a disproportionate amount of the examples came out of New York.
Right.
And I would find a story, and it would be an incredible story, and then I find out it was New York. And I'm like, I don't know why that couldn't have happened in Sydney, or why it couldn't have happened in Kansas or California, or somewhere else. But it's just there's more innovation. So the bar was a lot higher to get in if you lived in New York than anywhere else. So for music teaching, I mean, I probably have more U.S. examples, but I have international examples from Europe and from South America and Australia. It wasn't about geography, because there are innovative things happening in teaching everywhere. It was about instrument. And this is the good and the bad thing. There is more innovation. I don't know why. There's more innovation happening among piano teachers than any other instrument.
No, that's
and
really interesting.
In fact, piano teachers think of themselves in a bubble. Like, I don't know, like, for example, you have to figure out what your audience is and things like that, but you write specifically for piano teachers, although I wonder what percentage of your material is relevant to non-piano teachers. And so I think one of the reasons for it is there are forums, there are pedagogy degrees, there are conferences. We have in the States, Music Teachers National Association, which is the incorrectly titled organization, because they are not a music teachers association; they are a piano teachers association.
Well, I was at their conference in Texas this year, and it was 90% minimum piano teachers.
Right. And so if you're a trombonist, it's not that teaching trombone is that different. Good teaching or creative teaching is that different, but it seems like there aren't that many resources for you. There's not that. So it's harder to exchange ideas for a lot of the other places. So it's really interesting. I just find it fascinating. And these are, we talk about these cultures, from a performance standpoint, flute players are way more innovative than anyone else, way more innovative than this is what I've found, than pianists. But from a teaching standpoint, pianists come first, flute players come second. So right. What is it culturally about that, and why is that? So as a piano teacher, like a lot of yours, I mean, if you run a local business, of course, you're not looking at everyone on the globe. You're just looking at people in your neighborhood. But if you are looking at the globe and how you attract, online students from all over the place, you are competing with everyone else. And the good news and the bad news for piano teachers is they live in a space where more innovation is happening than these other areas. So in order to stand out, you have to go beyond that to be different. That said, while the most innovation comes from piano teachers, it's still really small compared to the potential. So if you're feeling like, I want to do something innovative, but there are other piano teachers who do it, believe me, there is space for you.
Absolutely, I know that for a fact. Yep. Yeah. Plenty of room. That's a topic I'd love to delve into more, actually, but we don't have time today, and I want to start wrapping things up. What I was interested in, two, I guess, final questions. One was, you quote in your 9 rules to teaching prosperity, right at the beginning. One of the first things you say is get over your fear of money. Can you explain why that can be hard for musicians and music teachers?
Yeah, and I do think this is changing a little bit. It's generationally. I know when I was in school, if you even pretended like you cared about not living in poverty, like, you felt guilty. You felt like, it should be enough. It should be enough for me to do it for the art, like the art is calling out for you, right? And I should be so lucky to just be able to barely get by and just live right below the poverty level, or whatever it is. I do think in a certain way that this is changing. And when I ask a lot of my students, or a lot of younger people now, when I ask older people, how many of you care about financial goals? Maybe it'll be a mixed bag. But for younger people, they don't want to be poor. They want to figure it out. But there's still this backwards kind of thing. And, I just had a final right before I talked to you tonight for a class called Music and Money, which is focusing specifically on this issue for this particular class. But one of the things that I talk about often, which is, what is a lot of money for a musician, and what is a lot of money for everyone else. We're on totally different playing fields. All right. And they don't really believe me, and that we are our worst enemy in this way, because we undervalue our worth to society. Yep. If you do it in a certain way, if your main if your main, a lot of musicians, well, why do you, this could get into a bigger conversation, but a lot of musicians, well, why are you a musician? Why did you decide to become a musician? Oh, because it's something I love. Well, of course, it's great that it's something you love, but if your only motivation is to do this selfish thing and it's not to give something to the community or contribute to the world in a positive way, you're probably not going to do that well, right? If you're only there because it's something you love. But if you're passionate about adding value to the world, music's an incredible tool, and it can really solve. We live in problematic times, and music can help play a role in solving them. It can't solve everything, but it can play a role.
Yeah.
So this is not about teaching, but there was at the University of South Carolina, there's a competition called the Proving Ground competition, where student teams can pitch entrepreneurial business ideas. The top award is $25,000 US.
Wow.
And so I had some students, some music students, who for the first time, these music students got into the finals, and everyone else was from the business school. And then we had these two music students who had a great idea. They wanted to do this thing called Project Opera Camp, which was an opera camp that taught music and life skills to underserved kids. But what was amazing was that it was a $25,000 award, and this is the moment that I thought they lost it. And this says something about how musicians think. So everyone else, all of the other teams from the business school, they're saying, this is my new business. I haven't done anything for it yet. But by my fourth year, our projection is we're going to be at $56 million, and we're going to be like all of these stuff like that, which is never going to happen. And then when they got up there, the judge asked them, well, how much does it cost to put on a camp? For this $25,000 award that we're thinking about giving you, how much does it cost to put on a camp? And their answer was, absolute maximum, it'll be $9,000. But we can make it a lot less because we can not pay musicians to get it. And at that moment, I'm like, they're going to lose. And I think they realized at that moment that we live in different worlds.
Yeah. And
we undervalue ourselves. And, if you're competing for a $25,000 award, why don't you use your imagination about how, and what a more compelling camp you could offer if you said, look, if we had $20,000, if you can do it on $9,000, think about how you could change their lives with $20,000.
Absolutely.
So we tend to undervalue ourselves and feel guilty about it. And the truth of the matter is, money is not everything, but it's important. Become literate about it. Don't become obsessed about it, but learn how it works. It's not rocket science.
And just take the time to think about it. It's very easy to just ignore it almost and just, we'll make ends meet.
Here's an answer I hear from people that say, well, I care about money. This drives me crazy. This is a sign of a starving artist mentality from someone that cares about money. So you talk to a teacher or a musician. Well, is money important to you? Oh, yeah, I'm really concerned. I have a family and stuff like that. Well, how much do you want to make? As much as possible. I know that they're not going to make very much. I know that they're going to struggle to make ends meet because when we have these fuzzy goals, right, as much as possible, I think a lot of times we use it as an excuse. Well, I guess $22,000 was as much as possible because that's all I got.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, no, I want to make, whatever you need, $65,000. And then you hold it there, and then if you don't make it, you'll know. At the end of I wanted $65,000, but I made $63,000. I failed. I got close, but I failed to reach my goal. Or I wanted $65,000, but I got $67,000. And and that's a great feeling when you exceed your goals. And it can be not only for money. How many students do you want? How many hours do you want to teach? Whatever it is. How many gigs do you want to get when you do master classes? By being accountable, we hold our students accountable, but we don't hold ourselves accountable a lot of the time. So I would highly stress for people to make actionable, concrete, measurable goals.
Financial goals, yeah. Don't undervalue yourself and get financially literate and set your goals. I think that's a great way to kind of summarize what we've been talking about. Last question. Oh, go on.
Let me just say, in the book, the promise of the book is it unveils a blueprint. The focus on income and impact, but unveils a blueprint for generating $50,000 to $100,000 annually.
Yeah.
I tried to use very conservative numbers, and it's not like a lot of books that, get rich quick books or whatever it is. They're like, here are secret formulas, and then you'll make $100,000 because you just will in your pajamas without ever getting up, or whatever it is. And they don't actually tell you how to get there. So what I had the audacity to do in this book is I use numbers in every way, so you can see how it adds up to 50,000 US dollars or 100,000. And you might not need to make that much, or you might need to make more than that. The point is not those numbers, but it does give a blueprint step by step on how you could get to those things by using multiple income streams and the likes.
Yeah. And that was going to be my last question, actually. Without going into the detail, just to give people a taste, what are some of those other income streams? We've talked about group teaching. What are some of the other, maybe just the top 2 or 3 that you found people are really finding inspirational from reading your book?
Well, let me just list the 7 income/impact streams that we talked about, but I don't have it in front of me, so let's see if I can remember. Lessons is not the only thing that independent teachers do. It's one.
Yeah.
The second is classes. I talked about a number of different types of class options, from early childhood classes to group lessons to workshops and those kinds of things. The third was camps.
Camps, yep.
Different kind of camp ideas, and there's incredible potential in that. Most independent teachers, your schedule might be different in Australia, but here, school's off in the summers.
In July, yep.
And so for most independent teachers, their income plummets in the summer. But for some independent teachers, that's the most
profitable.
That's the most profitable area and impact full area of the year. So camps, events, technology, merch, products, and then the last one was miscellaneous, which could be anything from playing to recording to non-music work to other kinds of things. So those are the 7 streams in the book.
Yep, and I learned an astonishing amount from all the stuff that you talked about. It was so good, and I did like at the end of each chapter you would have, okay, here's the financials, this is the number of books we're selling, or this is the and this is a low range and this is a high range. That's where I'm getting my figures from. Here's the outcome. I applaud you for doing it. I think it is so good. Yeah, I know, but it's something we all ignore so easily.
In order to do it, you have to. There are 4. There's addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. I have a second grader. He's pretty good at all those. I'm sure all of your listeners can do them too. And if it's hard, you can use a calculator or a spreadsheet. You just have to be disciplined about thinking through the model.
You just have to do it. I think that's it. Yeah. Well, look, I'm going to recommend everyone reads this book. I've been doing it since I got hold of it. So thank you so much for your time today, but also for getting this book out here. We all need the kind of help that you're giving us. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been an absolute delight meeting and chatting with you.
Now, where can people find out more about you online or your forthcoming projects that you've got?
Lots of places, but go to Savvy Musician, SAVVY musician.com. You can find out more about the Savvy Music Teacher through Amazon or through the publisher site. There's a site on the Oxford site. There's a companion site. Has a whole bunch of financial documents that are available for free that you can work through. You can type right into the documents. I run a program called Savvy Musician in Action, which we didn't talk about today, but is really spectacular. And so anyway, just type it in, Savvy Musician in Action. You can find it.
Yep, and you've got one of my good friends, Leela Viss, going along, and in fact, one of my community members, Marie Lee, maybe I think. You got a few of my close friends there.
That's right. And in fact, one of our thought leaders this year, you might be interested to know, is Brandon Pierce.
Oh yeah,
who's the first Teacher's Helper.
Yeah, absolutely. I interviewed him, in fact, 2 episodes ago, episode 41. Yeah,
he's a cool guy. Yeah. And he was probably in Bali when you talked to him, or somewhere.
Oh, I don't know. Yes, in a hammock next to a beach or something. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I feel like such a slacker being in a chair.
No, that's all right. David, we better wrap it up. Thanks again so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye. If the idea of a piano teachers community where you get to access the best educational resources, rub shoulders with expert teachers from around the world, and have immediate access to feedback for any of your questions, then Inner Circle membership is for you. The Inner Circle is my private community of piano teachers from across the globe who share a commitment to creating and delivering the most inspiring, modern and progressive learning experiences for their students. Membership is now open, so head to timtopham.com/community to find out more and get involved today. I can't wait to see you on the inside.